This narrative tells the tale of Grant, a guy whose life unexpectedly changed amid a difficult divorce. Packed with strong feelings, court cases, and unforeseen turns of events, Grant made his way through, challenging obstacles with perseverance, and his story is both engrossing and motivational. Welcome to a society where every choice I make while working for my master's degree in chemistry is a chance for a new beginning, and every step is a struggle. Laura and I met at graduate school, and we fell in love right away. It took her nearly 6 months to fall in love with me, but it did happen. Despite the fact that neither of us had any experience, our sex. She never complained, and we were married less than a year after she was married and found employment in the same city. Following 3 years of marriage, I left State University to teach part-time while she taught at a smaller college. Began working as a consultant full-time and became a specialist in explosives. The federal. Around the time of the birth of our first daughter, Angela, I was working mostly for the government, which included a lot of travel. I understand that Laura found it difficult, but I did offer to resign and take a full-time position. I also had a teaching position at a nearby college that had repeatedly attempted to hire me, but Laura preferred the money I chose to stay because of the job I got and the lifestyle it had given us, and I can handle things on my own by the. I had had enough and promised to switch careers once more when our second daughter, Grace, was born, 2 years after Angela. Laura advised me to continue working as a consultant since by the time Grace was 7 years old, we had another kid to support, clothe, and educate. When the schedule became more flexible, I assisted with childcare, and once the girls started school, Laura made the decision to return. She obtained an administrative position at the nearby university, mostly handling the liberal arts college, which I never understand why, but it made her happy, so I didn't mind. Laura became very interested in our shared passion for photography. Over a dozen albums documenting our lives with the children, another seemingly strange pastime Laura acquired at the time was in other languages, mostly Italian. Laura occasionally traveled for work, particularly too. We had visiting academics, visits with a buddy named Gina, and meetings with donors in Chicago. Friend Laura's from college, who was working in Chicago at the time and was an Italian exchange student at the time. Between the ages of 8 and 10, there were several terrorist attacks worldwide. Therefore, my expertise was extremely beneficial to the. I was offered a full-time position with the federal government, and after considerable deliberation with Laura, I chose to take the task that would have me traveling widely for 2 years. I would be gone for more than. Laura urged me to accept things 1 month at a time, stating that she and the daughters would be okay without me. It would be all right. I spent 2 consecutive Christmases abroad on federal government assignment while Grace was 9 and 10 and Angela was 11 and 12, which caused a lot of stress for Laura and the children. Brought them along to see Gina in Chicago, and during their week-long stay, I chatted with them on the phone daily. Evidently, some of Gina's family were in town, some of whom the girls had already seen, and they were content enough. And a few of them were about our daughter's age. Lastly, right before Thanksgiving, I completed my 2-year mission battling terrorists and returned to full-time consulting. Although I didn't travel much, Laura did. Normally, I travel to Chicago once a month for 2 or 3 days. I'm glad I took on all of Grace and Angela's parenting responsibilities while Laura was abroad. It's normal for girls to grow closer to their mothers than their fathers, even when they occasionally accompanied her. Although Grace and Angela and I got along well, they were never able to provide me with any significant information. They seemed to be exchanging personal information all the time, yet they seldom ever solicited my opinion on personal issues. With the exception of one thing, they were never their typical talkative selves. I wasn't really bothered by Laura. Despite not being reclusive about it, they never talked about their experiences traveling to Chicago with their mother. Just before 18-year-old Grace left for college, she frequently altered the topic of conversation by offering knowledge and giggling. Laura had a difficult period when I was out of state, and Angela was a junior at another out-of-state college. I noticed her weeping many times, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said that it was because she felt like she said that, as an empty nester, she needed to take the girls to Chicago for a shopping excursion. The trip was organized swiftly and involved many lengthy phone calls with Gina. Since I couldn't speak Italian, I just took Laura told me that even though she had never been this upset in 3 or 4 days, I had no reason to distrust her. Laura returned after 3 days before she and the daughters left for Chicago, but she was still a little emotional. I was quite aback to see that she had made several purchases and that 3 of them returned with further shopping when I inquired about it, I was informed that some of the products, including those that would be sent straight to the girls, would be shipped later. I saw that my sex life, which was never awful except when I was absent for long periods of time, had changed to college addresses. Since I never cheated on Laura, things improved when Grace left for school, which I ascribed to our development together. Closer because we were able to enjoy our newfound freedom when our children left home. I took a Thursday off from work and dropped Laura off at her house. I had intended to play 9 rounds of golf, but the weather put a stop to that, put an end to it. Instead, I was preparing for our forthcoming anniversary. At around 3 o'clock, I spoke with an event planner about throwing Laura a surprise party, and I would be there until 10 o'clock. I work as a delivery man, arrived at the door carrying a wooden container with brittle symbols on it, and he used a dolly to carry it up our front steps. It was addressed to Laura. I gave my signature, and with the delivery man's assistance, we set it up steadily in the living room. The delivery man carried the package up to the front door on a dolly I couldn't picture, which I found odd. When I checked the return address, I saw that Romano Photography Studios was listed first, followed by an. I contacted Laura at work and informed her about the arrival of the package at the Locati 0 Inn in Chicago, which I knew was in the city center. Crate was silent for a while before stating, "Oh, that's work-rated they were. I think they made a mistake and forgot to deliver it to me at the workplace. Please leave it unopened, and I'll get assistance." Normally, bringing it to work tomorrow would be a valid excuse, but there are 3 exceptions. When I informed her about the container, there was utter stillness on the other end of the phone, and I considered. Laura never skips a beat, so when I asked whether she was still there, her response that I shouldn't open it was more like a. She seemed anxious when she said it, and having worked in counterterrorism, I'm used to receiving orders rather than requests. I asked her what was in these items after working in but I wasn't. I was certain that it may be artwork from a Chicago-based organization hoping to show at my school. I asked not just to be helpful, but also to see how she would respond. "I'll open it at work. Do you want me to open it now? In the event that an insurance claim is required, we must inspect it at work to ensure there was no damage." The following morning, before I went for work, 2 college maintenance workers caught Laura stuttering. When Laura, my supervisor, arrived, I gently transported the carton to a school vehicle. I exclaimed, "I can't wait to observe the school's display." I was gauging Laura's reaction without looking her in the eye, and she said, "I'm not." "Yes, that is what it is. However, I will notify you if we choose to do an exhibition within the 14 hours I have been given." If Laura's 2 comments on the same topic hadn't piqued my curiosity, nothing would. When Laura never brought up the container again after the gift arrived, I became a little skeptical. I looked into it and discovered that a well-known photographer in the U.S. owns Romano Photography. I had likely heard of him before, but Laura's passion in photography and her employment at the university astonished me by never mentioning him. Frequently entailed discus. Seeing photographers and painters, Pero had a very unusual style. The majority of his images had effects in some areas and actual photographic realism in others. Regarded as an expert in long exposure and the bokeh panning rule of thirds, 2 classic photography effects, he frequently used several effects in a single image, and he was the only one to use a special effect called. I assume that after him, Romano Abilita Artistica roughly translates to. Nobody else has been able to replicate Romano's artistry, and I've never seen it written in English. It's challenging. My best attempt at putting it into words would be to explain that it makes certain characteristics extremely lifelike while making nearby ones are hazy and exhibit color or shade changes inside the same item, although that isn't accurate, as many of the. Although the information about Pero was intriguing, the administrator's 2 facts really stood out to me. Gina Romano Bayan, his niece, was in his studio. I only knew Laura's buddy who I'd only met once and never in Chicago. Her married name was Gina Bayan, and on September 1st of last year, he passed away in a car accident. How ironic that it was around September 2nd that his memorial ceremony in Chicago took place on September 6th of that year. Laura reportedly started crying since she was an empty nester and that she and the girls were out shopping. Journey to Chicago from September 5th to September 8th. I am intelligent enough to have a master's degree, yet I am not a genius. It was somewhat shocking to me in chemistry class, but I was able to figure out that the only plausible explanation was that my girls were fully aware that Laura and Perry Romano had been in a romantic relationship for at least 10 years. Additionally, Perry's most well-known and thought-provoking works would be on display in Chicago. Those that belonged to private collectors and that, before to the show, had not been publicly displayed. Occur 3 weeks from now, from April 16th to April 18th, and at the moment I learned about this, I was very certain that, even though it was my birthday on the 18th, Laura would probably be in Chicago at that time. I was more inspired by the show, which included the picture that was sent to our home 2 weeks ago. Then, eventually, I would have to cope with my tardy wife and disloyal daughters due to my initial anger. Therefore, I had to plan a business trip for the evening of the day that I discovered in order to do what I desired. After discovering some damaging information, I had to devise a strategy to get revenge on Laura. 2 nights later, I sent her an apology message on her work phone and informed her that I would be staying at a nearby hotel for 3 nights. My initial goal for the evening was to prepare all the divorce documents for serving and filing as soon as I obtained the necessary documentation. Finding someone to see and film the Chicago show on the 16th, the first day it opened, Ed, was step 2. Part 3 of my invitation only was to prepare everything since I wanted to leave the divorce as soon as possible. I was beginning to feel the same way about Grace and Angela, and Part 4 was about that. I wasn't worried about my connection with Laura. Part 1 of Taking Vengeance was simple, even after the divorce was finalized. Received a referral for a competent divorce lawyer, Gail Skiff, who advised me of my obligations, and despite the fact that she claimed she was prepared to accept the grounds of irreconcilable disagreements, Dale only needed to uncover evidence of adultery, so I assumed Ed would have it for her by the morning of the 17th before she could submit the paperwork. May set up service on Laura with a private law enforcement agency other than the county sheriff. Process server to document the events of the exhibitions last night on the 18th. After doing some investigation, I discovered I visited Roberto Milan, a young appraiser in Chicago who was attempting to establish his firm in Chicago, and Roberto spent nearly an entire day conversing with him. Roberto was certain that he could get an invitation to the opening on the 16th. I was delighted to take what I believed to be the most captivating pictures. I gave him a small, pricey, easily concealed HD camera, and he believed he could create a nice and high evaluation of the value of the pictures I thought would be there. Some very qualified appraisers might be able to dissect my analysis, but I would gladly accept the task since it would enable me to demonstrate. I took the art of assessment very seriously, and in a different section of the series, I had 2 bearer bonds that we'd. I wasn't sure whether Laura had ever heard of them, but they had been in our safe deposit box for at least 12 years, and she most certainly wouldn't recall them now, and they were valued at around $25 total for an additional Part 3 segment that I handed my lawyer. I also took pictures of all of Laura's jewelry and a complete list of our possessions, including an evaluation of our home. I sent my lawyer the most recent credit card and bank statement information, along with everything in our safe deposit box save the bearer bonds. Amounts still owed for broking accounts, retirement plans, and purchases as a little section of Chapter 4. Laura was at work, so I went inside and covered my face with a magic marker on each. Laura had created a dozen or so albums in a single image throughout the years, but I had never looked at them before. Was shocked to see that I only appeared in 15% of the pictures. Additionally, I discovered 2 images that I had never seen before. Even if I had, I probably would have assumed they were harmless. I created excellent scans and picture copies of Laura, Gina, Grace, and Angela in them. Of them, I put them back in the album and marked them in black. I also discovered 2 pictures that I had never seen before Even if I had, I probably would have regarded them as innocent because they had a legend 2 days and an arrow pointing to Pero. Laura informed me that she needed to travel to Chicago from the morning of the 15th to the end of my business trip. I offered that I go with her on my birthday because I was sad that she wouldn't be there in the afternoon of the 19th. She seemed to have anticipated how I would respond when she told me it was all business, but that she would take me to a resort the next weekend and make it up to me in a way I didn't anticipate. She kissed me after saying that, and I assumed she was only attempting to be pleasant at the moment, so I simply had fun. She appeared a little. She pretended that nothing was wrong. But that was only the beginning, darling, for all of. Parts 1 through 4 of my strategy were especially dangerous when I became at ease with and hired the. Actually, I was very sure that everything would work itself out. The only thing that was hazardous was speaking with Grace. As soon as I left Laura off at the airport on the morning of the event, I knew I had to confront Grace. I traveled the roughly 180 miles from Columbus to Carnegie Mellon University on the 15th. Why did Grace and not Angela pursue chemical engineering in Pittsburgh? Both girls were substantially more. Grace was far more like their mother than I was, at least in terms of how her brain functioned, than Angela. Chemical engineering was obviously extremely close to my heart, but neither Laura nor I could have imagined a path of study in that field. Despite not telling, Grace, who had a chemistry degree, was more inclined to be honest than Angela or Laura. I contacted Grace on Laura's relationship with Pero, but she showed a greater interest in the nuclear family than Angela did. Her phone when I was halfway there, and she looked eager to meet. I offered to drive her to a good restaurant for lunch. And we got together at a spot she recommended about a mile from school. After we finished our meal, I said that I needed something to discuss Grace with you. You appear confused. Are you physically okay, Dad? Yes, but I'm in complete mental turmoil, and I want you to swear that you won't tell anybody about it, not even your mother. I held my palm up in the air and said, Angela, until the day after my birthday promise. After I asked for a pledge, I swore POS position, and she sounded serious. Gulped. Okay, Dad, I swear, she replied, raising her hand in an attempt to force a grin. I've been seeing P. Romano on the side, and I'm unsure if I should tell anybody about your mother. I yelled out, oh no, Daddy, and my wife sobbed while covering her lips with her hand. There's just one thing I can do. She began to weep, and I could see she was upset because I needed to know all you knew about it, and I needed you to do a DNA test. I recommended that we depart since I was on the verge of a complete breakdown and didn't think the restaurant was the appropriate setting for this. After I paid the waitress in cash with a $20 tip, I went outside into my car, where I saw Grace was. After crying for a few minutes on the sidewalk, I got into my car and said, okay, Grace, we need to talk. While she was unable to speak, and I was simply looking at her when she began speaking. I was unaware that. I didn't learn until I was 12 years old that our mother was having an affair with Puro, or Uncle Pooh as we were instructed to call him. Expressions of love each time we visited Chicago, particularly on Christmas from. I heard about Angela's remarks beforehand, but I wasn't smart enough to decipher them. I spoke to my mother, who stated that it was. She said that it was an adult issue and that she was in love with 2 guys. She also added that I would understand when I grew up. I was swore to because I believe she used the phrase, you were too insensitive, to indicate that it may spell the end of our family. Secrecy, Grace said. I hoped that at P.E.'s funeral that would be the end of it, after crying for a time again, and that you would never know. I addressed her one more after she embarrassed herself at his coffin, telling. She stared at me and questioned how I could tell her the entire tale if she just jumped into someone else's arms. Consider her in that way. She loved you and Pedro, and she only needed to do tribute to Pooh's memory. I trusted her, and hoped that the day you learn would never come since I'm certain she won't fall in love again, or even have a sexual affair. Asked her a lot of questions, but I didn't believe it would be wise to do so until I learned more. Knowledge. She was still upset when I explained that the second reason I went there was to meet. What you've told me and your mother will assist. But I need one more thing. We must submit DNA samples to determine if. I know that I am your father, and you are my biological daughter without a father. She sobbed. You are my only father. Said, but I need to know whether I'm your genetically child as well. She continued to object, but eventually consented after I demonstrated. I sealed the envelope containing the letter addressed to the lab after reading the directions on it. When I took her back to college, she observed the letter instructing her to submit the findings to me as well as to Grace directly. As we said our goodbyes, and I threw the package in an express mail mailbox, she pleaded and assured me that Since I'm not sure whether it will work out, I can't guarantee that you'll forgive her and make it work. Happens, but you've increased the likelihood that it will succeed by doing your part. Now, keep in mind not to tell anybody about our. She grinned and then stammered. There's one more thing I should tell you, Mom and Angelo, until the 19th at the latest. We'll be at an exhibition of Poe's works in Chicago, including some pictures of your mother on your birthday. He informed me. She apologized that it didn't work out, but she must go because the tasks she inherited from Pero as part of his will were. She wanted me to attend the display, but I had too much schoolwork. I smiled and calmly responded. We embraced once more, and she left as soon as I could. Thank you for being honest. Didn't know at the time, but I wasn't sure yet. But my relationship with Angela was now as dead as the one with Laura. If I could salvage it with Grace, Grace was unaware that I had placed a recording in the vehicle. The mail that should have been mine had a swab from an Italian caretaker who worked in my office block, and over the years, we had remained friends, and as a birthday present, I agreed to pay to have his heritage confirmed. He was more than 80% Italian, with some Eastern and Western ancestry, according to the test results that were delivered to him. He was pleased to share his European ancestry, but why did I include Italian DNA, and what was to be tested in place of? I chose to utilize an Italian since throughout the course of DNA testing, they can even if discovering the ancestry of both contributors by comparing two sets. Pedro was Italian, as I had wanted everyone to believe he was Grace's father, and I thought that if I could make up with Angela, Grace wouldn't find out that I had spoken to her on the. She told me she hadn't over the phone on the 16th and 18th, and since I hadn't heard from Laura, I was certain that was the case at 11 o'clock. PM Roberto Milan sent me pictures of the pertinent sections via email in the morning of the 16th. Of the Romano exhibit, they had a greater impact than I had expected, and I was clearly moved while I was there. It was a set of 10 images that progressively grew in size from the first to the last, each showcasing unique Romano traits, such as the final two, which showcased amazing Romano Abita artistica effects were named Neil Amore. The series' first two images truly struck a chord with me. Displayed two females with blurred features in the backdrop of a picture of a woman who was definitely Laura. Their hair and clothing made it obvious that they were Angela and Grace, who were between 9 and 11 years old when Laura's body was revealed. And in the following three pictures, Laura had what could only be called a duck face appearance. Less clothing until she was completely nude in the last one. The second series began with a picture where in the final four pictures, the females in the backdrop, who were a little older this time, were ever more nude, and the final one was identical to the second to last one, although Laura was in a really striking stance in that one. Given that Laura was completely dressed, it was evident that she had just been ducked and was in bliss following my vomiting and drinking. I had a big weep after drinking ginger ale, and I went back to look at the pictures. If they hadn't made me sad, I'd have to say that the last two photographs were perhaps the greatest of their sort I'd ever seen. I read the text accompanying Roberto Milan's report. I realized that this will be hard for you. The collection is worth a minimum of $300. It's probably worth approximately $500,000, but the second to last shot alone would bring in at least $122,500. If you were to sell them separately, the last two photographs would be the greatest illustration of Reno Abuelita creative effects ever. I'm not just stating that at least 4 other appraisers and art experts agree with me. I asked Gina if any were for sale, and she put me in touch with the owner. But as you could anticipate, Laura stated they weren't for sale at the present, since the 4 pictures she was in would not be sold until after her passing, and they were priceless, so I wouldn't want the public, and particularly my spouse, to see me in that state while I'm still here, she stated. I laughed and sent my husband the digital version of my recording of Grace's words and images in Roberto's words. Gil Skiff, my lawyer, contacted me at 7 to let me know that it was 30 in the morning. On the morning of the 17th, if Laura's divorce petition is justified on the grounds of adultery, a police officer will serve her tomorrow evening. I mentioned that I will drop it off so you may communicate it to your process server at the Gaia. Along with the divorce documents, I handed off a package to Angela with Gail. Inside, there was I sent a letter, the Italian janitor's cheek swab, a container with a fresh sample, and an envelope. The letter I sent to Angela included instructions and was sent via express mail to a DNA lab. Angela should read it if there's any chance that we may date in the future, there's one thing you must do for me. Must swab the inside of your cheek, place it in the envelope the DNA lab has already received, and mail it. You'll see that the lab has instructions to mail the findings straight to your school locati 0 and 2. You must follow my instructions even if you don't want to be in a relationship with me in the future. If not, I'll create. Yes, our funds are locked up for years, and you will forfeit your junior year tuition, accommodation and board, and other expenditures. Even if you despise me as much as your deeds and inactions in your last years at that pricey private university towards me in the past would suggest that following my instructions is ideal for you. I believe you'll discover it's in your. Grace has already agreed with my request in the best interests of your father, Grant Oster, and I'm pleased I wasn't in Chicago when the process server reported to me on my birthday, when reality struck the fan. At around 9 p.m., Gail reported that Laura and Angela were beaming as they socialized with the public. On the 18th, the process server was snapping pictures, and they were perplexed when the policeman gave them the envelopes. The law enforcement officer departed after they immediately opened the envelopes, but the process server remained to take further pictures before he was expelled, which he sent to Gail and me via email, depicted Laura descending steadily onto the ground, finally settling into a fetal position. Angela was first upset, but on the morning of the 19th, upset at my handling of serving the papers, I responded that she was incorrect too. I was furious when she declared that she didn't want to learn who my real father was and that she wouldn't be doing the DNA test. Rather, she wanted to know why I had been providing for her for so long. I jokingly responded, "You're my father," and she. Maybe I answered, maybe I didn't, but one thing is certain. My lawyer has already frozen all of your mother's and my accounts, so there won't be any funds left over for your schooling or your living expenditures since, unless you swab your cheek today, you'll be 20 years old in the future. I'll need a video of you wiping your face, placing it in the envelope, and mailing everything now that I think about it. Considering how many lies you've told me over the years, I won't lie now to make you believe me. Oh my goodness, you didn't disclose the full truth. Did you mention that your sister is sorry and would pay her tuition? You make me ill. Therefore, I won't waste time talking to you about it since you're just as horrible as your mother. Follow my instructions and send me an email with the. I threw the phone down saying, "Video or this is the last conversation we'll ever have." Having a landline allows you to make a statement by slamming the phone down, which is more impressive than just pressing the red button on a cell phone. Convey a lot. The disgusting mother likely postponed her return by failing to phone me between the 18th and the 21st. Spent 2 days in Columbus, offering condolences to her closest friend Gina. The enthusiasm at the show on the 18th was. A picture of Laura that was clearly sold to them by the process server was featured in 2 local Chicago newspapers. Had a nice laugh since I was so hungry that I had to puke up. The disgusting woman did visit the home on the 22nd, but I didn't realize it was no longer my house until I saw the envelope I had put on the new front door. My lawyer had left a message on my mobile phone stating that the steel object, which had a strengthened frame and a new lock, was no longer there. We had to speak since the mail was addressed to Vile Ducking, and I thought Laura would recognize it as mine. Please get in touch with my lawyer to arrange for the acquisition of your personal information since the inner message was turbid. Possessions. I will fight any attempt on your part to restart as soon as we sell the house and end our marriage. I implore you to start the process of making a good change in our lives by staying in this house until it is sold. P.S. The doors are booby-trapped, preventing any unwanted access. The relationship does not resist. Will cause your whole family album to be destroyed, and we ultimately had to hire attorneys to resolve the living arrangements. If I hadn't included that P.S. in the message to the owner, I possibly could have gotten what I wanted, but I couldn't help myself. So we ultimately decided to sell the house and vacate it with the aid of our attorneys. Laura, the money we were paying on temporary housing was immediately included in the asset division. Attempted to be tough on the money, but she had little leverage because she had purchased her priceless photos from Pero, but while I insisted on 5 pictures, still married, so she could pick one, then me, and so on, until all 10 were divided up. Her lawyer claims that she became emotional particularly once she realized how I had altered the. Laura insisted that we take Roberto's evaluation of the family photo book, which was completed by an appraiser, hired by her, and won by an impartial appraiser. Ironically, Robert was the least expensive, costing her $200, spending $200 more than she would have if she had agreed to his evaluation, which significantly reduced the amount of money she would. In the end, she gave me 2 of the pictures she selected, but she wasn't happy with the deal, so I had my lawyer tell her that I approved of them, provided she had them transported to the nearby shooting range and saw my actions. By the end of the divorce process, Laura acquired half the furnishings and her personal belongings, and 25% of the house's sale price. She received nothing more, not even alimony, which we did agree to. That we promised to cover the tuition at Grace and Angela's college, but that the DNA results for Angela and Grace would be the only additional expense. Revealed they weren't my biological daughters, which greatly displeased Laura. I talked. Grace appeared content with the arrangement, not Angela, who had consented to it just to pay for her college expenses. My mother claims that the results are incorrect, claiming that she has only ever had intercourse with me and Pero while. I never even knew Pero before I was born, yet she was married to your father. Why is your father of Italian descent like that? Pero, your mother has shown herself to be a pathological person when I'm back on both sides of my family. Why would you think that she was telling the truth about her love for me for the more than 24 years that we were together? Despite she claims that she wants another DNA test, that won't occur because you're not minors, and it's unrelated to the divorce. I was just curious about the facts and wanted to have. You watch me swab my cheek and insert the swab, and you and Angela are aware of the reality. The envelope, and then send it yourself. Dad, Mom also wants to chat. She claims that she has repeatedly asked her lawyer for the information, but she is unsure if your lawyer actually related to you because she never received a response since I informed her that I'm not. I'm going to waste time talking to that woman, even though I still adore her in spite of her flaws. Would you kind of do me a favor and chat too? Sorry, Grace, but I can't do that. I've forgiven you, and I want to keep the fact that I don't want to have to deal with her for an hour. Nothing to do with you. Not even Laura's suspended jail term would force me to speak with her at this time, or the proceeds from the sale of the property after I discussed the DNA test with Grace and Laura's want to speak. She did something foolish with me, and I assumed she may do something else, so I hooked up and went about with a. One evening, a lady knocked on the condo's door using a panic button that was directly connected to a private security firm. Was renting while going through the divorce process until the last financial matters were sorted out. Worked out. I glanced through the throng and didn't notice Laura and the 2 large men standing over to the side. When the door was opened, 2 large men rushed in and seized me, but not before I pressed my silent emergency button. Seized hold of me, pulled me to a chair, and bound me. Laura entered, and the other lady removed me. Grant, I apologize for having to do this, but you refused to meet with me and did not repeat the DNA test, which I know is incorrect. She claimed to have always loved me and to have adored Pero, but she also acknowledged that we had reached a moment where reconciliation. She was obviously holding a swab while she spoke to me, simply to get things off her chest. Going to have me give a DNA sample, and she was incredibly irritated that I didn't say anything. I gave no answer at all to anything she said, and I didn't try to recognize her or answer anything she said. Fortunately, she was ready to have her 2 associates pry my mouth away from my contact. Open for a DNA swab, the security firm responded to my panic button, had contacted the police, and 3 cops showed shortly. Armed with their firearms, they discovered me bound, and I indicated that the man had unlawful things in his pocket, but the cops disregarded Laura's request to just let. The 3 of them were detained. The police and the court in our case were not pleased with the kidnapping episode. After she made it apparent that she would rule against Laura in the event of a divorce, I received the split of. Laura was given leniency by the criminal court due to her assets and other factors mentioned above. For her first offense, she received a $110 fine and a 2-year suspended sentence, mandated to pay a $1,000 fine, which came from her portion of the marital assets alone. The 2 men failed to say goodbye. One was sentenced to a year in jail before being eligible for release due to their shady pasts, and the other with the. Part 4 of my strategy continued after the divorce was final, even though unlawful activities continued for 5 years until parole was granted. I'll never acknowledge here or any place else that I was involved. If someone asked me how I did it, I always say that it was simply karma. Was on a Caribbean cruise with a 32-year-old who was older than me, 18 months after the divorce was final. Attractive divorce who liked being pampered. At that age, she resembled Laura, and I wasn't searching for a long-term partnership, although she was enjoyable to spend time with throughout my cruise. Laura's flat was stolen into. Some items, including the second most precious and provocative items, were smashed and stolen while she was working there. In actuality, more items were destroyed than taken, including this Romano portrait of Laura. Included all of the family picture albums and 7 of the 8 surviving Romano photographs when I returned. Was a suspect, and because I was on a boat and 2,000 miles away, I certainly couldn't have done it myself, but Laura informed the. When the police began questioning me and claiming that I was a suspect, I refused to tell them that I had paid someone to do it. After speaking with them and obtaining a criminal defense attorney, they looked through my financial records and phone, but were unable to locate the two. Found no evidence that I had paid anybody to cash out bearer bonds that weren't a part of the divorce estate. Do it, and they were unable to locate any proof of someone who may have done it. I had the clear feeling that 6 months. The cops essentially gave up once they initially got in touch with me, even though Laura probably persisted in nagging them after the. When the statute of limitations finished, I hosted a party to celebrate, putting everything behind me, and most people came. My parents had passed away, but my brother, his wife, and I were still living thanks to friends. Melody's 2 older children, Grace, her spouse, and my granddaughter were my nephews and my new romantic interest. I don't currently have a connection with Angela, and I didn't receive an invitation to her wedding. However, I did hear. Angela is in the early phases of divorce procedures after her husband discovered that she had cheated on him. Grace was given. To everyone's amazement, including mine, Laura gave me an ultimatum. Either sever all of our connections, or she would choose me. Likely understood that I was speaking the truth because, more significantly, she had been a pathological liar. When Grace saw her mother's connection with her paramour and her daughter's looks, she saw how awful it was. She had them fabricate a story to hide her infidelity because Grace didn't want her kids to see the harm her attitude had caused. Grace and I had been at odds for the past 5 years, and when I told her the truth about the DNA testing, she became upset with me. Initially, but she was pleased that I was her biological parent, and I've forgiven her for her deceit over the years. Father, this narrative of Grant is incredibly emotional and has surprising plot twists, as evidenced by another DNA test I had done. Relationships, court cases, and individual trials demonstrate how individuals handle life's obstacles. Story 2 at 6:07 a.m., Elaine saw the dissolution of her marriage on Monday. She was choosing an alternative route to avoid traffic congestion because of the accident and arriving home later than normal. Her front went crimson, causing her to stop suddenly. She was waiting idly while gazing across the street when she watched as her husband Sam leaned down to give the little girl a peck on the cheek as they left the hotel. After that, the cheek went to the parking lot and the girl went back. Oh no, not again. Complained that Sam and Elaine had already been married before he was 20. He said that they just got married too young and that she met him before his first wife abruptly left him for the first time. Elaine was 20 years old when she first married, and her first marriage ended in divorce after 10 years. She believed that they would have a blissful marriage for many years until she came home from a trip to discover him with his secretary. Was irritated by how quickly he moved on. She felt mistreated and spent years wondering what she had done. He had married a silicone drifter, had kids, and was content with his life until she met Sam and her life came back to life, and they began dating intermittently until he proposed to her, and they were married 4 times. Years ago, she believed she was content, but she angrily recalled herself that they were occasionally arguments. Believed that she occasionally overspent, but that wasn't the case. They weren't in a precarious financial situation for 2 years. An unfortunate incident occurred after the wedding. Concerned that her biological clock was ticking away, she met with a doctor and discovered that. She said that she couldn't have children, but he accepted it well and consoled her for months when she sobbed. He mentioned that if it was that crucial and their personal lives weren't too horrible, they might adopt. She thought, maybe these. Was it the case that they only did it once a week? She seldom ever refused him, but perhaps he didn't want to. To inquire constantly, no, she reasoned, recalling the picture of the girl she had just seen, which was about a pair of, had lovely, cellulite-free legs, and an expression that looked to be admiration for him. Perhaps it wasn't what. She seemed to be grasping for air, but she didn't really believe him when he said he would be late. Wasn't picking up his phone since he was going to meet someone, and didn't tell her the truth. He claimed to be in the office, but in reality, he was outside when the light in front of her changed to green, but she hadn't. She didn't realize she was driving until she heard the impatient honking of the drivers behind her. Stopped and started crying after turning down a side street for Hal. FA block. When it was finally finished, she removed the visor and, as she was attempting to apply cosmetics, Sam's cell phone called and he asked, "Hello, honey. Where are you?" "Oh, I'm on my." "Is everything okay on the way home?" she inquired. "Why do you sound a little funny?" She attempted to act as though nothing had occurred, "But I'm okay and don't want to deal with it." "Are you at home?" "I'll be there. Do you want some Chinese cuisine in 10 minutes? If so, I'll see you when you come home." The phone returned before him and used the bathtub to clean her face. "How was your day?" "There's too much to accomplish on a terrible day at work." "Has anything else happened?" "Whether not." "Why are you wondering whether she's guilty?" Though she checked his mobile phone while he was in, she checked it and said, "Oh, nothing, just chatting." In the previous 3 days, she received 17 calls to and from a number she didn't know. Called Harrod hello and blocked the call by dialing 67 on the home phone. On Wednesday, she hung up the phone after hearing a young woman's voice and told her friend Margari during lunch what Elaine had informed her about the phone conversations on Monday. "Oh my God, Al, this is awful. Have you seen him in person?" Jim was doing the exact same thing back then. "Present me with the facts, and he will just deny it. Perhaps Margaret just recommended a one-night stand once, and he will feel bad about it and cease using the phone. Calls over the course of 3 days, so I don't think this is an isolated incident." Marjorie shook her head empathetically, asking what you would do. Sam's cell phone rang in this instance, and I said, "Honey, I'm going to be late." "Again, I won't be too late tonight. Maybe an hour or so. So don't expect me to join you for dinner." Marjorie was at a loss for words. "Good. What did he say?" "He won't be at dinner since he's working late," she added. They exchanged glances, and Elaine answered, "Yes, it's possible that he's seeing her again." They sat in Marjorie's car in front of the hotel and watched as she said, "I have to see this." "I witnessed him enter and exit the parking lot. If I were to go inside and look for them, I doubt I could because he isn't registered." "And you don't know her name?" she began. As Sam and the girl left, Ain grabbed her phone and snapped a photo. On a Saturday, she heard his phone ring and saw him embrace her before getting into the car and leaving. She wasn't proud, but she approached softly when she heard him ring and watched him look at the screen before leaving for the patio. She tried not to be heard as she listened at the sliding doors. "Good morning. No, my folks are arriving. I assumed you would be staying with yours." "Oh, I see. I'm afraid I can't. How about Monday?" Didn't inform her that we would discuss it later. But the words, "I love you," were the ones that stuck in her head. The agony of the previous 2 days had twisted her from the inside out, and his parting words were the last straw. Transformed her. She was furious. How could he treat her this way when he loved her? "You didn't tell her what she expected you to say. Wouldn't you have told her?" She went on angrily. She would let him know when she was ready because she wanted him to know what it was like to be treated as though he were a complete stranger, because she knew that if he were the only one crying, she would take everything that the law would allow. Permitted her to go, and she ignored his somewhat remorseful expression as she walked out onto the patio with her head held high. Is quickly approaching, so after dinner and dishwashing, Ely went to the backyard alone to observe a basketball game, so she picked up the phone and phoned. She was happy all Sunday, although there could have been a small issue with him. "Believes I'm having my period, but I'm too naive to realize I may have other causes." "Are you both okay, honey?" Naturally, Mum asked. "We just had a little dispute, but I'm sure you'll discuss it with me before bed." "Do you still love me, Sam?" "Of course I do. My love, sweetheart." She hoped it was true. It would be beneficial when Sam came home on Monday, a week after she first saw him, because his world started to fall apart exactly like hers had. That afternoon, She contacted him and inquired, "What time will you be home for dinner?" "I have to be home at 6:30, as usual." I mentioned that I would be at home for dinner between 6 o'clock and 6:30 because I wanted to do something special, but it would have to be kept a secret. "You make sure you're not late?" "Okay. I'll be home between 5:30 and 6 o'clock 30, since I have a meeting before that time. The plan for today is unexpected," and she responded, "See you later." Okay, I love you, honey. Yes, I'll see you," she answered, and closed the conversation. The meeting was canceled. Sam decided it was time for him to depart. This wasn't the night to be late. What he had to say could be disagreeable, and he didn't want Elaine to be upset already. So he started by going through He dropped the keys on the counter in the kitchen door and asked, "Hey, honey, are you here?" When he didn't hear back, he saw her right away. He pressed the key to bring the laptop on the kitchen table with a message, "Play Stuck," displayed on the screen. He hit the play button after the screen came back to life, and he noticed an extended media player. "Hello, Sam, or should I say, greetings." Elaine's angry face was warped on the screen as he saw her lift her phone, revealing the built-in camera. "Do you recognize her?" The computer could notice it. "I know the picture is excellent, but it's difficult to take a. She's the one you're looking for. But if you're not sure, here's a hint. She's the one with the phone from a car. Did you think I was foolish for doing it behind my back? Perhaps it had been going on for a while. Perhaps it began recently, but there have been others over the years, and I was simply too blind to notice it." Sam stood and stared, but it doesn't matter. You might be asking yourself, why am I not sitting there and telling you about it in person? Additionally, you may be wondering why your clothing aren't lying about the front yard and why your hair hasn't been altered, which would reveal everything. Now that you're wondering what will happen next, I believe I'm correct. Well, Sam, here's what I've always enjoyed about. The expression sauce for the goose and the gander is now somewhere between 600 and 600. And at 6:30, you're sitting in the kitchen of the house you ransacked. Where is your wife? Sam is probably someplace else. She shares this moment with you as the clock approaches 6 a.m. Let's start with a little foreplay to lift everyone's spirits. It's merely a pleasant moment that's beginning to make some guys feel wonderful. I'm worried that Tom will be exhausted by the end of the night. Do you remember Tom? I believe I brought him up a few times, but he works in a different department, so perhaps not, but he looks good and is tall, roughly 6 feet. Do you think he's good? Do you know down there? I sincerely hope so. He's humorous and adorable. If I weren't such a devoted little wife, I might see myself going out with him. I assumed he was divorced. He was okay with it when I informed him that my marriage was gone and that I was looking for a bit more. How are you? He felt as though someone had punched him in the stomach. She gazed at the screen with a stern smile. What's the circumstances there? But where are I? My phone is with you. Feel free to call me. I suppose it would be pleasant to receive your frantic call, but I will obviously be unable to answer it. I've always been trained not to talk with my mouth full, therefore I won't be able to answer this phone. She chuckled at her own joke, but perhaps you'll try several times. And it's fun to share you. I'll be able to think about you while you're thinking about me. Or will you just send me a few messages telling me not to? Revealed yourself to a small acquaintance, and now I'm telling Tom, as well as to you, I suppose, even if you can only see it in your. Let me explain some of the other activities we have planned. What are you doing tonight? I don't want you to have any issues. Sam tinkered with the mouse, halting the video, but she went on, not wanting to hear another word. How could this happen? He had absolutely no strategy at this time. His head was throbbing, and everything around him was in ruins as he sat for a long time. What was she doing more? Crucially, how could he prevent it? Should I contact her? She refused, so I went around the hotels. Little town, but the center had a lot of hotels. And it was almost 5:30 when he picked up her phone. His fingers were shaking so hard that he cursed when he clicked on the link in his computer's browser and signed onto the website. After selecting Account, menu option, Find My iPhone appeared, and he waited for a. He quickly retrieved his keys as a blue circle showed on the map near the Jefferson Apartments corner. He looked around to check if anyone was watching for 20 minutes after leaving the counter in the hopes that traffic would be clear. When he eventually reached the Jefferson Spaces hotel parking lot, he made a half circle. He glanced at the windows and sliding glass doors of the rooms ahead of him before he noticed her Honda standing by alone. If she had been there with someone, the curtains would have been drawn, but just two of them had their blinds down. He approached the first one after being drawn and knocked. He tried the glass door, but it was locked, so he knocked once more. But when he knocked on the door again, after running through several rooms without a response, there was. He heard movement, and the curtains parted, but there was still no response. He had never seen this man before, but he understood that he had gone in when he noticed that the man's head was nearly to the top of the glass. The proper chamber opened for me, although I'm not sure what you're. Sam entered the room, but I believe you got the wrong number since the man's voice was muffled by the glass. He said, "What, aren't you manly enough?" He was purposefully being disrespectful, clearly displeased that Sam was smaller than him. The guy turned around and glared at him for a time. Reached out, clicked the latch, and unlocked the door. "Did you say something? Oh, you could beat the crap out of me." I wasn't backing down, but I wasn't going to give up easily. The question was, were you willing to tamper with someone in such a wrath? You could see it on Tom's face. He knew this guy's name, and he knew he wasn't just some random maniac. He could see the seriousness in this threat. Then the voice that Sam was terrified of but knew would be there said, "Allow him." And Tom, she was seated on the bed, her blouse totally open, displaying a lace bra. Her hair was unkempt, and her makeup was a touch smeared. "Did you start early?" he said tartly. "There's still a few minutes before 6. "Oh, just warming up a little," she answered, but believe me, the big event is coming shortly." They gazed at each other. Tom broke the stillness. "I believe you two need to be alone. I'll be in the front room. Don't go far." "Honey," Elaine told him. "It doesn't matter. The door closed. You can't do this, Elaine." Sam replied. She could sense the fury emanating from him. "You can't stop me. We are consenting adults. Or maybe you could pick a fight, because Tom is much bigger than you. I imagine management will call the cops quite fast when I start yelling. Do you want to spend the night in jail while I spend the night here? I was going to return home later, but in the dawn, of course, I can do an encore." Her rage matches word for word. Really, don't do this. I'm sorry, but you don't have the right to vote. You should go now, Sam. Enjoy yourself." "I've been ex-dad. I see to think about what you've been up to this week, and I can only imagine what's happening here." Vina felt the agony in his eyes and his head as a result of those words, and no matter how hard he tried to, she felt some pity when she saw how he realized that resisting it forced him to consider things he didn't want to confront. That his life was not going well, but it was merely a habit, and most of her felt retaliatory. He stared at her, and the glee that comes from knowing that you can harm someone who has fully damaged you in return. "Don't do this, Elaine." "You're welcome." I wanted to tell her, but she cut me off. Anger fled him, leaving just sadness on his face. "Sam, I believe that everyone needs a little solace during their time of sorrow." She added softly, "I'm sure you'll find comfort elsewhere." "Where's Susan?" he said. Any kind of uncertainty she had was wiped away when he responded in the car, appearing to have given up, written all on his body. He questioned, "Were you with her this afternoon?" as a fresh surge of rage raced through her. "Just a little bit," he replied, "but not. In your opinion, spend a little time with your attractive 19-year-old year, Sam." She chatted slowly, but regrettably, she is only 19 and not 18. "I took my daughter home to present her to you, but you don't care how old she is," Elaine burst. "Have a daughter?" She answered, "I didn't think so, but Marianne was indeed expecting. She handed up the kid after it was born when we split up, but she never informed me about it." Susan didn't know till she was 18 when she made the decision to locate and meet me with her birth parents. A month ago, Elaine was sitting there with me. She contacted me last weekend when you were at your parents' house, and we first met, and my jaw is absolutely hanging open. Weak to chat. "So why didn't you inform me?" "That he was quiet for what I believe was." Susan stated that she wasn't prepared to meet you for a number of reasons, including the fact that she wanted to get to know me personally without the presence of outsiders, and in part because she was uncomfortable by the fact that she wanted to handle it gradually and no longer loved her biological mother as though she were a mistake, but I wouldn't push it. The second reason, Elaine raised his hand, was I was nervous and I am unable to have children. As a result, we struggled. You may recall my unexpected appearance with my daughter. I wasn't sure how you would respond, and to be honest, I felt a bit of a coward for forcing Susan to meet you, but she's in the car because she decided to do it today." Tom peered into Elaine's room, saying, "Elaine, I think I need to go. I assumed that you were no longer truly married, but it's clear that's not the case." Elaine looked at a number of men. "Okay, that's the greatest way to apologize, Tom." I felt it was different when he said, Go away, Sam. Maintain eye contact for a little period B. For giving a quick nod and turning away, leaving Elaine in. After a long period of silence, your daughter remarked quietly, I know what you're thinking. I was crushed. I'm truly. He perched on the side of the bed, and I'm sorry you felt that way. Thank God you were here, Sam. I promise that if you hadn't come home, I wouldn't have had this plan to kiss him, even though I know I did. Hold off till you watch my video and give Sam a call. I promised that nothing would have occurred until you arrived. Reached me in time, grabbed his hands once again, and dragged him down to sit on the bed. I'm not sure how you discovered me. Oh my God, that would be disastrous and destroy our entire marriage. I was astonished to see you in the window. He glanced at her and said, Oh, Sam, I'm so sorry. Let me get my act together so I can meet her and we can go home. Hey, Elaine, I'm here to finish this because I still care for you, and I knew you would. If you had sex with this man and later learned the truth, you will never be able to forgive yourself. He took his hands off hers, but she said, What are you talking about? As her eyes widened in disbelief and she lunged for him. We're not together anymore. I told her, puzzled. I'm leaving you, Ling. I can't. Actually, I'm not. I'll take what you've completed. But Sam, you must realize that I knew you had done it. Elaine cut him off, saying, No, Ling, you weren't sure if you'd walked in and saw me having sex with her. Then sure, but you were unaware that it didn't happen, and you made an assumption based on that assumption. You chose this abomination because you believed I was an unfaithful spouse. You chose to depart. You made the decision to do it with someone you were still married to. And you chose to torment me by contemplating. You chose not to speak to me and not to search for any other potential partners while you were doing it with him. Justifications for why you chose not to treat me with dignity. I apologize, Sam, but I just cannot respect this. I made a mistake by leaving me to do this with this person. It's not a relationship, marriage, or love. This isn't about you, Elaine. Rather, it's about who we are as a pair. I've learned my lesson and won't do it again. This isn't the type of relationship I desire. So please stop us from experiencing what you had planned for me right now. I apologize to Sam, but I saw you. This isn't the type of relationship I want or deserve. I can't say that I would have been shocked to see you leave a motel with a guy, kissing her outside of it. I don't blame you at all for that. I'm sure I would come to the same conclusion as you. Although his concerns were valid, he persisted in disregarding the reality that she interrupted him. But I would have seated you in front of me and asked you to clarify what you. I would definitely be furious at what we were doing, and I could have even shouted a few things that, later, I would regret it and have to apologize forever. But I would talk to you and offer you an opportunity to. If you could provide me with another explanation, I would have enough faith in you to believe that there a chance to keep our marriage together. And even if it were the worst thing that could have occurred, you would own that it was a mistake and wish to attempt to repair it. We might not have succeeded, but at least we would have looked into it. I wouldn't go. Sam, I didn't touch him. We just shared a quick kiss. Don't leave me and do this to someone else to get even with you. I really wanted us to work together, so I kissed a guy. He stared at her incredulously, thinking that even though you had just kissed him, you explained precisely what you were going to do with him, even what you never let me do, and the big event should have happened right away. You don't realize that I'm not leaving you because you kissed him, he said, ignoring her cry. Or even because even while I acknowledge that it most likely had an effect, the actual cause is that you didn't value us enough to speak with me, let alone trust. You didn't want me to know if I still loved you, or whether I felt bad about what I did. If you can't trust me and can't even attempt to communicate, you simply intended to harm me in order to hold on to our marriage. I can't trust you if you can't trust me, and I can't trust you if you believe that trust has vanished. I can't trust you, she replied, but I know that when you're certain that you are. As soon as you determine that you don't need to ask anyone else what they think, you will not regard as an equal. You will make decisions on your own, even if they involve causing someone unspeakable suffering. You say you love me, but imagine what pictures would be in my mind right now if I hadn't found you and you wanted me to view those pictures. You would have me in a frenzy at home as you explained all you and Tom were going to do as she pushed farther into the bed with each syllable. Okay, so you made your own decision. Since it's not something that can be switched off like a switch, I still love you even if I'm building mine now. Switch. Even though I hate what you attempted to do to me, what you did was incorrect. I can't stop loving you, but I'll try. I'm going to my daughter, Sam. Oh my God. She begged him not to listen. She nervously glanced around as he removed and flung his wedding band at her before turning to leave. The clock read 6:07 as she searched the room for her shoes so she could go after him. Morning. Elaine saw the dissolution of her marriage on Monday. This narrative makes. When you consider issues of trust, loyalty, and individual identity in marriage and relationships, it demonstrates how even. This is the tale of Grant, a guy whose little choices may have a significant influence on both our lives and the lives of people we love. His trip is full with strong emotions and legal issues when his life took an unexpected turn following a difficult divorce. Conflicts and unforeseen turns of fate, Grant persevered through challenging circumstances and his story is intriguing and engrossing. Welcome to a future where every choice I make while working for my master's degree in chemistry is a chance for a new beginning, and every step is a struggle. Laura and I were in love at first sight when we met in graduate school, but it took her around 6 months to show her feelings for me. However, neither of us had much experience, yet our sexual life was fantastic, and she never voiced any complaints. Less than a year after being married, she found work in the same Locati Zero Inn where she taught at a small college, and after 3 years of marriage, I left State University to work as a part-time teacher and began working as a consultant full-time.